په افغانستان کې د اګست 15 تحول راوروسته نړیوال ټولنې دلته خپل دفترونه وتړل او مامورین له افغانستان څخه وایستل. کله چې طالبان واکمن شول دغه ټولنې یو ځل بیا لیوالتیا پیدا کړې چې په افغانستان کې خپل فعالیت له سره پیل کړي. دوی بشري مرستې وکړې، دفترونه یې پرانیستل او سیاسي نمایندګۍ فعالې کړې. اروپايي ټولنه هم یو له هغو بنسټونو وه چې دلته یې پراخې بشري مرستې کړي او د دې مرستو رسولو لپاره غواړي چې په افغانستان کې خپل فعالیت لا پراخ کړي. د همدې او ورته مسایلو د څېړلو لپاره سره په افغانستان کې د اروپايي ټولنې استازی ښاغلی ارنوټ پاولس میلمه دی. ستړي مه شئ، زه نجیب لال زوی یم. Mr. Pauwels, you're most welcome. Thank you for giving us your time. You have been engaging with the Taliban unofficially. Are you looking forward to engage with them officially in the future?
The events since August 15 and long before, of course, have led us to consider our position as European Union. This means the organization and the 27 member states. So after August 15, there were a number of high-level political discussions, and they led to a position on September 21, where we decided that we would engage with the de facto authorities, and we have 5 guiding principles to do so, objectives. I will not go through all 5 of them, but I will mention the main ones. The first one is women's rights, work and education, and this is in the framework of the general framework of human rights. The second one is an inclusive government, and I'll go into that. With this we mean a stable government where all the people feel part of. And the third element is free travel. People are able to leave the country and come back to the country. And counter-terrorism is also an important element. Based on these elements, we agreed to engage and also to establish a minimal presence in Afghanistan. So basically to be here at a diplomatic level.
So it's still unofficial engagement?
Well, this is a new term you're bringing into the debate, so this is interesting. We are speaking about recognition and about engagement. We talk officially. I mean, officially means that a person in his or her job description is transparently and openly and publicly speaking. This happens in Doha. There have been 2 meetings between delegations from the de facto authorities with the European Union and EU member states. Both delegations were led by Acting Minister Motaki. I hope I pronounce his name correctly. And my presence in Kabul, now that the delegation has been re-established, is official. I'm not here undercover. I'm here official.
The most vital question the people in the world have been waiting is the recognition. The EU is yet to recognize the Taliban. What are the future plans?
We think the most important thing is the well-being of the people of Afghanistan. In every meeting I have, and I would like to do that here too, it's the first time I'm on Shamshad TV, the suffering of the people of Afghanistan. 43 years of conflict. It started in 78, and we don't have to go through the history here, but we have to be aware of that. We are now in a new phase of the history of this country, and we all have to work together so that it is a peaceful phase where we can get stability, where people can live not only in safety and security, but also develop themselves as a person and the country socially and economically. This is the most important. And stability in Afghanistan will have an impact on the regional stability. And this is the overall objective of the European Union, is to develop this region, to help develop this region and connect to this region.
Recently, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Afghanistan, Mr. Stanigzai, said that the world is waiting for the US to come forward and take the lead in recognition of the Taliban. Is European Union also waiting for the US to take the lead in this regard?
The US is an important partner and ally of European countries and of the European Union as an institution. The US is an extremely important country in the world, and this means, of course, that the position of the US counts. European Union is also a very important player in the world. We are among the top 2 or 3 economic blocs in the world, and our position and ambition, also from my leaders in Brussels, President von der Leyen or the High Representative Borrell, to have a politically autonomous course. And on Afghanistan, this has always been our position. Afghanistan is on the Eurasian continent. You can take a car and drive to Brussels. You can take the soon, or not so soon, but you can take the train from Afghanistan and go to Brussels. So we are connected, and we will carve out our own position in close coordination and consultation with all partners: US, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, India, everybody, and the people of Afghanistan too.
So it is not for anyone in the world to take the lead. It will be unanimous.
There will be a process, and at this point in time, I think there are expectations towards the de facto authorities. They have been spelled out. There is a consensus, worldwide consensus, that doesn't happen so often on political issues. Now, the engagement process has been going, I would say, quite well. We are talking to each other officially, but in an engagement format. And through that dialogue, we get to know each other better, understand what the positions of one and the other are. And at this point in time, I think we have reason for optimism as far as the political things are concerned. We are, however, most focused on the humanitarian situation for the moment.
Mr. Representative, we had EU embassy, EU member countries' embassies in Afghanistan prior to August 15. We only have the office of the EU now. Are the EU member states willing to and are intended to reopen their embassies?
Yes, that is what we heard from our member states, that quite a few are planning to also re-establish themselves at the level they will decide based upon security considerations and political considerations.
You have been saying not only EU but the world international community that they will not assess the de facto authorities in Kabul but the people of Afghanistan in terms of humanitarian aids and assistance. Do you still have that position? Are you not assisting the officials?
We are a country. A country cannot function and develop without rulers, without coordination, without guidance. It is for the, I would say, for the de facto authorities to come to terms with the population, and I'm sure, and that's what they told me and others, that they're welcomed by the population and that they are popular. Well, if that's the case, we look forward on how their relation with the people.
Do you see that population reputation?
Well, we know there was a lot of violence. I will not go into the details of that violence, and that has now, for now, stopped or almost stopped. So this is, for the moment, a positive development. However, because the economy is having difficulties, because of sanctions, because of a freeze, because of the shock of August 15 and our repositioning, the people are suffering. I visited a hospital this morning in Kabul, and it was clear to see the testimonies were very harrowing.
You have been engaging with the Taliban here in Kabul, with officials, the de facto leaders. What are those shared interests that EU and the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan are working on, apart from the humanitarian crisis?
Well, the humanitarian, as you mentioned, it is, I would say, a basis. The de facto authorities are open to all kinds of cooperation and engagement that we offer. There is a package in preparation for what to not direct, so to send and to support sectors of the society in education or health, to support with salaries, to support costs, and to do this outside the government. And it has been confirmed to me by officials from the de facto authority that this is exactly, that they welcome this development.
Overall, which kind of engagement are you expecting with the Taliban here in Afghanistan?
I think the five, as far as EU is concerned, the five elements I was referring to are really guiding principles. So in that sense, the situation is quite clear. But to give an example, as a diplomat, I am here to build bridges between this country and the EU, between the de facto authorities and my leaders. And I explain here how important the rights of women and girls are for us. And I would also suggest and think important for this country. How can you develop a country if half of the population cannot receive an education, cannot be professional, and cannot work? And this is the kind of dialogue that is important to have, respecting the culture of this country, respecting the history, but looking forward and looking to the future, seeing what is needed in a society of the 21st century.
Mr. Pauwels, let me ask, do you have the same interests as you used to have prior to August 15 with Afghanistan?
Yes. Our overall objectives have not changed. The well-being of this people, the economic development of this country and of the region.
And are the relations the same?
They are developing. So what we have seen on August 15 is a unconstitutional and unconstitutional change of power in a context of violence. In other places, so if we compare to, I will call the Myanmar, Yemen, Libya, or other places in the world, Mali, if there is such a situation, then the international community reassesses its relations with the ones that took the power. And then a process starts by which we want to make sure that the new rulers act in according to international principles and in the interest of their people and are supported by their people.
Coming back to recognition, Mr. Pauwels, what are the biggest issues and the obstacles for the recognition of the Taliban? Because people say that it is the most important thing in order for the economy to be resettled and the humanitarian crisis to end. Do you see improvements in this process?
Yes, we see some positive steps, and such a positive step is the fact that so we know in terms of education for girls that primary education is there and that higher education is there. I'm not speaking about economic difficulties of paying for education. This is a challenge for all boys and girls. In some provinces, but the minority of provinces, the secondary schools for girls are open, or this is what we've been told. So it would be very positive from the de facto authorities if together with the United Nations or the EU or others, that we go and visit and have a transparent dialogue about the challenges the government has to reopen all the schools for all the girls. This is in the interest of this country. The international community will not continue to support Afghanistan for the eternity. This is just simply not durable. Yeah. And therefore, it needs development, and the development will go to giving the opportunities to all its inhabitants, men, women, boys, and girls. And this is the dialogue we need to have.
As you said, Mr. Pauwels, your office, the new office that has been reopened in Kabul, is only for the, and the most important thing is for you, the humanitarian crisis to be addressed in Afghanistan. Do you also carry out political and diplomatic missions through this office?
بیرته راګرځو موږ سره پاتې شئ.
Yes, on the humanitarian part, but this is, let's say, internal organization of the European Union, it is important to stress that all humanitarian action responds to certain specific own criteria. They help people independently of political situation of rulers. A humanitarian action of the European Union has taken place in the entire country over the last 20 years. In that sense, for them, there is no big change. But we will also be active on other, let's say, in other areas that touch upon salaries and working costs, as I said, in education or health. And yes, I am having these official meetings with officials of the de facto authorities in the framework of an engagement of understanding each other, in trying to move forward, in explaining indeed what our position is. I don't frame it in terms of expectation. The rulers here and the people here will decide their course, and based upon those facts, we will decide ours. But our objective is the development and the well-being.
And how was your assessment from the negotiation in terms of politicians and political issues? How were the engagements? Were they fruitful?
We're in the first stage of getting to know each other. The framework of some of the meetings, sometimes we only have, for example, 30 minutes. Most meetings work through translation, which is logical. So it takes a little bit of time. But overall, very welcoming, open. The de facto authorities say it at every level, both in Kabul and in Doha and in the meetings, or in the media, sorry, that international community is most welcome to return to Kabul and to work. So the de facto authorities are Afghans, and those of us with experience in working in this country are familiar with Afghan culture, and in that sense, I don't see any major change from the past. Besides, yes.
Yeah. Qatar's foreign minister recently said that EU does not have a clarified policy towards Afghanistan. Is that true?
I have met him, and he has not suggested that to me. If he would, I would reply that we have it, and that it is found in this document of the 21st of September.
What is the specific policy of EU towards Afghanistan? Is that those 5 things you mentioned?
Yes. There is no automatic link between those 5 elements and recognition. Recognition will be a consensual decision, at least that is what we should all strive for, a consensual decision of the international community with the de facto authorities. And I stress again, I am surprised by the actual consensus. I cannot speak for other countries, but interpreting positions going from Pakistan, China, Russia, over EU and US, we're on the same line, same position, with different stresses.
And the member states of the EU, do they have shared policy towards Afghanistan?
The member states.
Yeah, or do they differ, or will they differ?
We strive within the European Union to have a single foreign policy, a unified foreign policy, and that is what we're doing through the consultation mechanisms, through this document I was referring to. We call them council conclusions, so foreign ministers get together and have a joint opinion. Member states sometimes have some different accents, where they put some more or some less focus on, but this all is within the same overall framework.
Do you have the same definition of the inclusive government in Afghanistan?
Well, I think I would like to, what I said in the beginning, important is that a government is accepted by its people. on December 10. December 10 is International Human Rights Day. And I think one of the things that were said then, the topic was equality. But importantly, I think, is there an understanding between the ruler and its people in both senses, where the ruler protects its people, all its rights, its human rights, political rights, and socio-economic rights. And if the ruler does that, if he genuinely cares for its population will accept this rule. And there has to be a way to express that, that position, whether that's elections, like in Europe, and like it has been done here before, or through a loya jirga, or through some other system where the people are heard. So this is something we will see. In English, they say that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Is there a stable system, political system, whereby people can freely express their opinion? One of the gains of the last 20 years was freedom of press. And I'd like to underscore the importance of your organization and your colleagues, and make an appeal to the de facto authorities to protect as best as they can. And it is an indicator of the, let's say, of the quality of governance.
So what specifically is that definition of you from inclusive government in Afghanistan?
It is not for me to, not for me to say or to speculate on that, but in general, one could say that not only all ethnicities of the country should be represented in the government, but also people with a voice in society that are not part of the Taliban movement, people that have not been fighting. We understand that at this point there is a certain eagerness from commanders and fighters to say we have this, we made this effort and sacrifice. But please don't forget the efforts and sacrifices from, I would say, the other side. I was here last year. I have seen the targeted killings in the streets of journalists, civil servants, and women. These are things that need to be addressed in the future. Both sides have suffered. I referred to it in the beginning. Both sides have suffered, and now it is time for healing.
The Taliban have been saying that it is an all-inclusive and completely inclusive government. How do you observe this one?
Well, they, let's say, point this out indeed by referring to the ethnicity of a number of the ministers and deputy ministers. And we take note of that. But we also note that there is no woman inside the government, and there is nobody outside the Taliban government. So I would suggest to have a sufficient amount of women inside the government with a meaningful voice, with real participation, and young people, older people who are not part of the Taliban government. We don't mean the politicians from the Republic's time. We don't mean that. I'm not mentioning names here. That is not inclusivity, or not necessarily. If they are politicians who follow a peaceful path of political dialogue, then this is inclusivity.
Come to the human rights and women's rights. From the lens of European Union, how do you see the situation of women in Afghanistan?
بیرته راګرځو موږ سره پاتې شئ.
Not good. The situation is not good because there have been restrictions on access to work and restrictions on education. The situation is much, much better than it was 20 years ago when Taliban were last in power, much, much better, but it is not good. I haven't had the occasion to go more into depth in dialogue to understand why restrictions on work are implemented. I've been told it's about dignity, dignity of women. I think it is important to ask women themselves what they consider dignified. This is important. So access to work is important, and not only for nurses, doctors, or teachers, but for the whole workforce, and access to education.
Do you think the rights of these women have been violated?
That is not for me to say here. We need to see human rights in a broader perspective. Women's rights are part of the broader human rights dialogue. And this right goes from the right to life to, now I'm venturing myself, right to happiness, to self-development and expression. In terms of the right to life, the fact that the violence has stopped is positive, of course. But if the next step then is you cannot work, not get a salary, where are you then? And in that sense, we all have to work together, acting the de facto authorities and international community to make steps to work on the humanitarian, work on the development, and work on the restarting of the economy.
From the definition of international community of the inclusive government in Afghanistan, it apparently seems that there should be women in the government apparatus in Afghanistan. Have you not discussed the women's issues, rights, and their participation engagement with the Taliban, or are they not interested in that, or is something else the priority?
We are still in the first phases, although it is now 4 months after August 15. But the first, let's say, official engagement talks are only 2 months old. And we don't see each other that often. But again, the presence of the EU in Kabul will hopefully lead to more dialogue and understand each other better. I look forward to a more intensive dialogue on that, and actually also to progress in terms of work. The message is not women are not allowed to work. The message is the overall conditions are not ripe for it. So we would like to know better what those conditions are and where we can help, and what the practical plan forward of the authorities are.
Coming to the sanctions on Afghanistan, the UN said that Afghanistan current situation is potentially the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Do the sanctions of international community suffer the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, or the people who are the real victims of the sanctions?
The sanctions were decided at different levels long time ago, 20 years ago, and they have continued on the Taliban, and they have continued their life. So there are sanctions on the Taliban. This fact is very well known by the Taliban. So the developments, I would say, over in this year, 2021, where there was no, let's say, peaceful settlement and a chaotic takeover, has led us now to a situation where we have an authority on the one hand and still sanctions on the other, and we'll have to overcome that situation. That is quite clear.
And apparently the victims are the common people of Afghanistan that now are suffering. Millions of people are laid off, no job, no financial activity, and the prices have been doubled. Do you think the world is going on the right path?
I hear your question. The sanctions have an impact on the banking system. An important player in the sanction debate is United States. It's not for me to pronounce myself on their position, but do note that they have sent out word, clear assurances to the banking sector that humanitarian aid is totally allowed. So I think it's also important to read and follow what our American colleagues are saying. Mr. West, the new special representative, I think he pronounced himself quite recently. If we can all debate on that, it would be a good thing for the people of Afghanistan if those sanctions would be ending quickly.
Thank you. Tell us about the humanitarian aids, the European Union pledge and the World pledge. How is it going now in Afghanistan? Where is the process?
We know the events of August 15. 4 weeks later, our humanitarian agency was back on the ground here with the field office, and they have been working. Two ladies have been working tirelessly on contracts. The European Union has, let's say, increased its humanitarian aid by a number of 4. So it was between 30 and 40 million euro, and it is now over 120 million euro.
And it happened only after August 15?
Yes, yes. So responding to the situation. I repeat again, humanitarian aid is apolitical. It responds to a humanitarian situation. That, we must underscore, is also a consequence of the drought, of the conflict, internal displacement, and other elements. And then the last element is the, let's say, brutal stop or slowdown of the economy. So this is is unfolding as we speak. If you follow the media, European Union has financed by now 5 plane loads full of medicine. One can say, well, this is not very much, but in one plane there is a lot of medicine. We are financing the World Food Program to bring in the food, World Health Organization to help a large number of hospitals. It requires a little bit of administration and time, but again, the team is working in extremely high speed, and we all have to salute here the humanitarian agencies of the UN who stayed in the country after August 15, and I would also say my colleagues from ECHO who came back very quickly to work for the people. The next step is to support salaries payments, as I said, and the step after that...
For teachers and health workers?
Teachers and health workers, and also support, let's say, the local economy, livelihoods in all the places in Afghanistan to get the economy going, and economic development. And the step afterwards, after that, is investment. So I do hope that this European countries, or better said, European companies, will quickly come to Afghanistan and invest, that they have a positive outlook. But this is, of course, a joint responsibility of all concerned.
But how do you see the cooperation of EU member countries in this regard?
What I'm expressing is the consensual position of the 27 member states. We look in the same way towards Afghanistan. The 5 criteria are there. We are engaged in a dialogue, not only the EU as an institution, so the spokesperson, if I would say, the main negotiator is our special envoy, Mr. Thomas Nicholson, as he is leading that negotiation, if I can say, engagement, both with the de facto authorities in Taliban and abroad. The presence here, and for the time being, let's say the diplomats speaking for the EU in Kabul complement that process by following up discussions, by suggesting topics, and by also reporting on the developments in the country, both positive and negative.
Yeah, how much do you see the ground is conducive in Afghanistan when it comes to delivering humanitarian aids to the people who are suffering the most?
There is full cooperation of the de facto authorities. Humanitarian agencies have a long history of working with them. And what is hindering humanitarian aid delivery is, we mentioned it, the very fragile banking system, the lack of cash, and let's say the regional cooperation is extremely important. Everybody in this country or in the region that can help needs to do so.
And how is it now, the regional cooperation?
بیرته راګرځو موږ سره پاتې شئ.
Positive. Improvement is, we will always have to strive for the most optimal situation so that passage at borders, transportation can work as it should be.
And there are no restrictions from the Taliban on EU activities?
There are no restrictions. We explain on the humanitarian side, there we need to get aid to the people. And that if the ones that need aid are women, the best way to approach them is through women. So our dialogue there is about the effectiveness of aid. And in that sense, this dialogue works, and there are indeed no restrictions. We hope that this positive policy can now be extended to all the sectors in this country.
Yeah, coming to mass immigration, or immigration at least, still thousands of Afghans are leaving their country towards EU countries. What is EU doing specifically in this regard?
Well, you may have noticed that EU and the ministers of the interior who are responsible for that have, well, their conference was the worldwide conference on how many visa would be extended to come to Europe on a humanitarian basis. If my memory is correct, it's 40,000.
40,000.
And the majority of those visa, or those 40,000, is for Afghanistan. EU member states have invested enormous amounts of money and energy in this country. So there is clearly an emotional connection to the developments here, to the people here, and we want to recognize what a number of those people have done, journalists, activists, and others. It is important for the de facto authorities, and they are doing that. They are not hindering in any way the free movement of people. We would suggest that the situation at the airport is solved. We understand there are negotiations with different countries, regional countries. It would be good that the airport could function in a normal way. It would be good for the humanitarian aid, for the economic
development. The only airport in Kabul airport, not the provincial airports.
All airports, I mean, there are 3 or 4 international airports. Yeah. Mazar and Kandahar are also international airports. It is just good for the development of the country.
Yeah, about the 40,000 visas that have been allocated to Afghanistan people. Tell us about those. What will be the procedure? To whom will these visas go?
That is for the individual countries to decide. Everyone has a policy in this regard. It is about expressing a humanitarian need, and there's a policy decision that while the situation remains unclear on the attitude of the authorities, the de facto authorities, and the people they control or don't control, to put it simply, how safe is it to be an ex-member of the ANDSF, or even the NDS, or a journalist, or a very vocal female activist? That is what we're looking at, and we do think, and that we want to develop this country, give hope, and that is why it's so important, we think, to be diplomatically present here, to be present with our cooperation and with future economic development. Afghanistan potentially is a rich country. Most of the richness are in the soil, and it's agriculture, but also energy and transportation and mining. Develop this country and the future is here.
Mr. Paul, what are the biggest concerns of EU in Afghanistan?
It is, at this point in time, the making sure that the potential of the population is safeguarded. A couple of months of education have been lost. Income has been lost. And this has a knock-on effect in the future. So the full support for human rights is extremely important.
Yeah, millions of people are still breathing in Afghanistan. Will the economy really collapse?
There is a tremendous effort ongoing by donors, UN agencies, economic actors to bring the necessary cash money to the country. It's almost as if cash now is like oxygen, as you said it. It's a little bit a race against time. Again, the field visits I have made, including to a children's hospital, show clearly how needed it is to quickly pay nurses, pay teachers, so that they can pay their debts again. They can go to the market shopping. Afghanistan is a nation of traders. I'm so amazed by the resilience of the Afghan people, by the way they can survive in difficult circumstances, sometimes thrive and keep a positive outlook. Now we should capitalize on that capacity, and the race against time is ongoing. We will go through difficult weeks and months, but without forgetting the suffering of many people. We're sitting here in a warm studio in Kabul. Out there it can be very cold, deep in the province or in the mountain. Without forgetting that suffering, I think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic and hopeful. And they also say that being optimistic is a moral duty.
Mr. Representative, I'm done with my questions. We'll leave you go with the last question, a personal one. Do you have your foreign personal guards?
No. Whether I have them?
Yeah.
Whether they're needed? Well, there is an entity called Daesh. There are explosions in the country. So there is a threat of terrorism and violence from Daesh, perhaps also from criminals. So caution is needed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Paul. Thank you for coming to Shamshad.
Most welcome. Thank you for the conversation. It was a good conversation with not so easy questions from time to time.
Thank you.
Bye.
ریدونکو ځانګړې مرکه همدومره وه تر بیا ښې چارې.
له لیدلو مو مننه.